Good afternoon, good afternoon. This is the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON. I'm Cliff Kelly. This is America's Heroes Group, engaging, empowering, connecting, and transforming veterans by being the hub to veterans' affairs, information, resources, and referrals. America's Heroes Group is proudly sponsored by attorney Steve Seidman of Seidman, Margulis, and Fairman, LLP, 20 South Clark Street, 2 First National Plaza, Suite 700, Chicago, Illinois, 60603. Toll-free number is 888-837-3275. The office number, 312-781-1977. As you know, I am the host, Cliff Kelly. The executive producer is Glenda Smith. The digital media producer is Manny Corazari, and we are pleased to have them here. And we have some great panelists in our studio today. America's Heroes Group Veteran Affairs Social Service Roundtable. With us in the studio, we have a gentleman who has been with us many times, and we're always pleased to have him. Marc A. Magill, Director of the Jesse Brown VA. How are you, sir?
Hey, great, Cliff. It's great to be back.
Great to see you. And also, we are honored to have Dr. Eric Proescher with us, a Navy veteran, a PTSD specialized person who can help us. He's been with Operation Iraqi Freedom and also Operation Enduring Freedom. How are you, Doc?
Great.
Good. And you look so normal. We're going to start off with a clip from CNN.
It is a tragedy of staggering proportions. Hard to believe. An average of 20 veterans and service members take their lives every single day. Who would believe that's possible? There are more than 6,000 veteran suicides per year. The suicide rate among veterans is 1.5 times greater than that for non-veteran adults, and the suicide rate for post-9/11 soldiers has increased significantly over the last 10-year period. To every veteran, I want you to know that you have an entire nation of more than 300 million people behind you. You will never, ever be forgotten. We are with you all the way. I think you know that. Supporting veterans is a very, very important thing to me, and it's been very important from my campaign, from day one, and from before my campaign, but from day one. Supporting veterans in distress is a critical priority for our entire administration, everybody in the administration. Last year, I signed into law the largest funding bill for the VA in its history, which included $8.6 billion for veterans in mental health services. I also signed an executive order directing the Department of Defense, Veteran Affairs, and Homeland Security to ensure our veterans have seamless access to mental health care and suicide prevention resources. These efforts focus on veterans the first year after they separate from military service, when they are at the heightened risk area. The White House VA hotline has fielded more than 200,000 calls and successfully resolved 93% of the concerns our veterans brought to them. And they work very hard. It's been very, very effective. We secured $206 million for VA suicide prevention programming. Every VA medical center now offers same-day emergency mental health care.
Sarah's last wish.
And that is something that we are certainly happy to hear with the Chief of Staff the commander, saying something I can agree on. That's great. Let me mention this before we get the response from our guests, because we have a different number now. We're in the new studio. The number is 312-374-8130. So if you'd like to give us a call, we'd be happy to hear it. 312-374-8130. Director Marc Magill, what do you think?
Well, I tell you, I am glad to see this executive order. I want to say, though, we have been really aggressive on our efforts the last several years to combat and prevent veteran suicide. The same-day mental health access. We've offered that. We've had that for a couple of years. And over the last year, we have doubled the number of staff that we have that are suicide prevention awareness folks. We're very aggressively getting out the word about services that we have, whether it's, again, appreciate being on your show, but we utilize social media, billboards, public events. I gave my suicide challenge, my 20 challenge before.
Right.
We'll do that some other time, I'm sure, but we get the word out, and I'm very proud of our services at Jesse Brown.
I'm proud of it too. In fact, when I hear what the Commander-in-Chief is saying, I'm loving it. But I also know, because we've been talking with you and Jesse Brown for so long, you folks have been doing what he's talking about now. So did you call him?
And actually, that's for sure. One other thing, he did mention that veterans are 1.5 times more likely than non-veterans to take their lives.
Yeah.
For certain segments of the veteran population, that's even higher. So, for example, for our female veterans, I think that's double what in the general population.
Wow.
A very complicated subject. We have lots of programs that we use, and one of them is one that Dr. Proescher is over, the identification and the treatment of post-traumatic stress. And that's a biggie. And VA, just as a system, has pioneered in that, the research, the treatment,
That's right.
and we're so far ahead.
That's
Yes.
great. Dr.
And-
Proescher?
Yes, it's
Please.
a very messy situation, but as you were saying, Jesse Brown VA is part of the largest integrated healthcare system network in the world, and we've been working on suicide prevention and treatment in the PTSD and having specialized services for over a decade now, and actually longer than that, but specialized services. And one of the things that we should point out that 20 veterans that commit suicide per day, well, 16 of those 20 have never come to a VA services. So one of the things that this executive order might, even before the executive order was served, VA was working on trying to outreach and connect those veterans that wouldn't come to the VA ordinarily. And one segment of those high-risk population are those that did not receive honorable discharges from the military. So VA has expanded mental health services for this population.
What was usually, pardon me, Doc, but what was usually the reason that they didn't get an honorable discharge? Was there anything in general, or what?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to get a dishonorable discharge. Or other than honorable discharge in the military. So it's usually a pattern of egregious misconduct.
Okay. That's why I was asking.
Yes.
Yes.
And all that's not to say that there aren't folks that went to war and had trauma and were affected in a way that they didn't make healthy decisions for themselves, and they got in trouble later on. And that was, of course, war and trauma can have a play in impacting one's ability to make.
Doctor,
rational
when
decisions.
would someone who has been in the service and knows that there's something wrong?
Yeah, that's a good one. So
Yeah.
the other thing there is in that statement, they said that they were going to try from day one to get veterans in. And, I've worked my whole career with post 9/11 veterans that have participated in the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan
Yeah,
and
you've
others,
been there.
in global war and terrorism.
Sure.
And I like to call them reluctant help seekers, So, part of the military and military culture has some of these traditional military cultural values related to self-reliance,
Right.
independence, emotional control, stoicism. Let's suck it up and drive on. So, through my whole career, it's very rare that I see someone within the first, couple months after they get out of the military, unless they were already identified in the military and then the transition was made.
Would somebody that's in the military who's on active duty, they would probably have a lesser propensity, wouldn't they, to show up because of what you just mentioned, the military culture?
They actually wouldn't be eligible to show up for VA services until they're discharged
Till they're
from
out,
DOD.
But I must say, but you've been in combat and so forth. The situation. How many people are able to, either of you, get help? I know we're talking about the VA now, but you both know what goes on. If someone is in combat and has a problem,
Yes.
Can they get help?
Yes. On active duty, there's a
because you've done
I was
that.
I was a psychologist in the Medical Service Corps on active duty, and there's a range of services on active duty too. So when I was on active duty, I was stationed right up north at Great Lakes. I was their suicide prevention officer there, and I got off active duty in 2005. But in 2003, that's when we first started to see the spike in these suicide problems among our active duty folks and our veterans. And even at that time, the admiral that was ahead of all the commands at the time had summoned me to because I would give suicide prevention trainings, and they wanted to know, hey, how can we stop this suicide attempts among our active duty folks? And I remember I was a little nervous at the presentation, but I developed this presentation and made the pitch that maybe suicide on active duty necessarily wasn't a mental health problem, but a problem of poor leadership, a problem of people not knowing what's going on and the people that are working on underneath them, right in their lives, that have this really intimated, very few places where you spend so much time and familiarity and, you're living and you're so close to each other, that you should know what's going on in people's lives and allow opportunities for people to get help. And
I'm having flashbacks when you say that.
Yeah. Well, needless to say, I wasn't invited ever back to.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It was a leader. Yeah. I just think that's great. That's funny because I've mentioned that a number of times.
But maybe that speaks to some of the challenges when people do leave active duty. They're away from their battle buddies, their resources, the connections they have, and that's why we at Jesse Brown VA have been really hammering the outreach, getting out there and connecting, using peers, using our mental health services, using whole health and mind-body approaches because there are many roads to the mountaintop, right? There's many ways to get there, and PTSD is and mental and anxiety and depression. These are very complicated conditions that affect people differently, and some people need, support and social activities. Other people need medication. Other people need a place to vent and talk. So there's no kind of one door.
Right.
That's there's many doors.
Yeah. One thing doesn't fit all problems, and that's why you all do such a great job, Director Magill over at Jesse Brown, because it's just fantastic what you do relative to this for the PTSD thing.
Very proud of the staff. One thing I would like to mention, this is a community issue as well, and I think that for your listeners, even non-veterans, anyone that knows a veteran, and we all do, whether friends, relative, neighbor, or could be a complete stranger. If you believe that person might need some help, reach out. Yes. That's the best thing we can do.
Yes.
Reach out. And we've given that Veterans Crisis Line number before. I know the
800. Give it now. That's great.
That's 800-273-8255. And that's for any veteran that's in crisis. And that's for any of us to call if we are concerned about a veteran. The folks that man that hotline, they'll answer that phone within 3 rings most of the time.
That is great.
and they'll get help to that veteran.
You know, something that I want to repeat that, 1-800-273-8255.
Correct.
And if you're a veteran, hit 1 and you'll
Oh,
be
okay.
connected to a
Okay.
VA staff. But if you're not a veteran, you can hold on and you can talk to someone as well.
That's good.
24 hours, 7 days a week. You
Right.
can talk to a live person, and they'll connect you to the closest VA to where you live.
Something I heard for the first time, it doesn't mean it was the first time, but at 4th of July, I'm an animal nut. I love animals, and I love it when they say, if you're going to use fireworks, think of the animal.
Yes.
But this time, I heard them say, and the veterans.
Yes.
I don't know whether that was the first time, but it's the first time I'd heard it. But I thought that was
That's great.
so meaningful.
I've
Yeah.
seen signs that people put on their yards that say, veteran lives here. Be mindful, during 4th of July. That stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have a friend, and you all would know obviously better than I do, but he doesn't seem to object to, and we've talked about it, because I've sent him over to Jesse Brown. He gets problems when he hears helicopters.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the explosions and so forth, the fireworks, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Helicopters, is that
Yeah.
common, Doc?
Yeah, so PTSD is a mental health condition that some people get after they've been exposed or witnessed to life-threatening events such as car accidents,
Okay.
combat,
Mhm.
sexual assaults, natural disasters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's essentially a re-experiencing that happens because our body, our minds are wired for survival, right? So we're very much aware of any potential cue, any potential threat,
Yeah.
and that kind of revs up our nervous system. So we're hyper vigilant, hyper aware, we exaggerate our startle responses, and it changes your physiology too. So you're always in that fight or flight mode, and that can interrupt your sleep, that can cause irritability, that can cause difficulties with attention, concentration, and memory, and it feeds.
Is there any way of telling, Doctor, before someone goes into combat, whether they would have a proclivity to be affected? Because, like you say, some people can go through exactly the same thing, and one guy goes off and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, no, they are
There's
working.
nothing.
Believe me, they're working on that. They're trying
Okay.
to. I even saw that they were trying to get a blood test, but their sensitivity and specificity isn't enough there where you can make these kind of decisions about who should go in or not. It's a little bit sci-fi-ish, but
Yeah, I guess it does.
test your blood. Okay,
I
you're
wasn't
good.
going to
You're
ask
good.
that.
And that's the research that I was referring to, that VA is so far ahead and
Yeah,
doing
which
a lot of
is-
work on
which is
post-traumatic
great.
stress and some of the variables that are involved in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the research projects I'm working on at Jesse Brown with Dr. Fahn is we're looking at the trajectory of how PTSD affects you over a period of time, right? How does it affect your memory, your sleep, your relationships? One of the aspects that I'm working on particularly is how important that social support is, how your connection, your social network, and that is such a buffer. And there are differences between people. First of all, those who get PTSD and those who don't get PTSD, the ones that have stronger, robust social networks
That
don't
makes
get the
difference.
PTSD. But even the differences between people with PTSD and the ones with social networks and the other, different. The severity is different. Their the avoidance behavior. So PTSD, so you have re-experiencing, you have, because it's uncomfortable to think and feel about the traumatic memory, there's a strong urge to avoid everything, to avoid cues, and your world becomes narrower and narrower. And then there's also negative thoughts about yourself, others, in a world, sometimes related to guilt about what happened. And then the last part is that the physiological hyperarousal symptoms that come across. And the ones with social support, again, even if they have PTSD, fare much better.
That number again, that's important. Director Magill, could you give that again?
Yes, and that's the National Veterans Crisis Line. That's 1-800-273-8255. And then veterans would press 1.
Just one.
There's also a text option on there, I believe, too.
Yes. Yeah, and so if you need to talk with somebody, the other thing was like what we talked about, our veterans being reluctant help seekers.
Yes,
when we
right.
see them, it's in crisis, and then they disappear. You can know that the VA, you can walk in at any point, and the first floor in Damon, our psychiatric assessment clinic, we can get you do an intake, talk with someone, and they set you up with a follow-up appointment the same day. We also, I'm at work in the Transition and Care Management Clinic that works solely with post 9/11 veterans. And we, same thing, we have someone that you walk in and be assessed and walk out that day with medications and a follow-up treatment appointment.
You gentlemen are just fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in. We had a call, we have to take a break, and we have some other guests. But if you want to hold on, please do so, because I'm sure there's something you would want to talk about, so you can hang on if that's okay with you. Thank you to you both for coming in. Sure will be seeing you soon.
Thanks, Cliff.
All right. Always a pleasure. Stay with